Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's edition of Conversations with. My name is Kayode Oyewole, and I work at Ventures Platform, where I spend most of my time interacting with founders, within the ecosystem in Nigeria and in Africa generally, and also, invest in some of the most ambitious founders, solving hard problems for the African continent. We're really excited to have everyone on this call. I think the last edition we had was with Jason, and that was really good. And today we're also having another explosive edition with Adia. And before I make an introduction, I'll just talk a little about the reasons why we have this webinar. So a lot of times, founders reach out to us and say, "Hey, I need your advice. I need help on this and that." And in most cases, I mean, we're not best suited to offer those sort of advice. I mean, I can't talk about partnership the way Adia will talk about it. I mean, she literally breathes and experiences this on a daily basis. And so one of the reasons why we set up some of these webinars was to say, okay, we're going to find domain experts in certain categories where we feel we are not best suited for, and we're going to bring them in touch with founders, looking for those sort of expertise. We're going to have them share some of their industry knowledge, and also, give a platform for founders to interact directly with them, ask them questions, really interesting questions, and, in that exchange, hopefully you'll be able to find some of the answers you're looking for. And that's largely one of the reasons why we do this webinar. And today's webinar is focused on, partnership as a distribution channel. And I think we don't have any better speaker than the person we have today. I mean, if you want to learn anything about partnership, I mean, before I even knew Adia, when I hear people talk about partnership, I'm like, who should I talk to? They say, oh, there's somebody Adia. I'm like, who's Adia? I'm like, oh, don't worry, you'll know her very soon. And I mean, if you speak to any fintech company, I mean, start up to the ecosystem generally, and you talk about partnership, I'm sure after like 5-10 minutes, Adia name will pop up somewhere in there, and we're really happy to have her. I mean, not only is she like an industry leader, she's also like a huge friend of the house, a VP, and we've spent time just learning from her wealth of wisdom and just like, interacting with her. And so without just, wasting further time, I'm just going to run through how this is going to work. So I'm going to introduce Adia briefly, and then she's going to have about 30 to 40 minutes to just talk around the topic partnership as a distribution channel. And thereafter, we would have time for Q&A, where if there are specific things you would like to understand or learn, and she hasn't touched on those things, feel free to ask those questions in the comment box. So, I mean, just so the call goes smoothly, we might not be able to allow you to, ask your questions in terms of like unmute you. But then you have the Q&A box that you can ask your questions, and I will just, if once I see your questions, I would obviously just, read them out to Adia so she can answer your questions. So this session should probably take anywhere between an hour 30, and I'm sure it's gonna be like one of the most useful experience you would have. And also, if there are specific case studies or examples you have, those of you that have been trying to deal with banks or big telcos, I mean, that's Adia's forte. And there are specific examples or specific bottlenecks you've been having, feel free to, if you can anonymize the bank name or anything, but feel free to share those experiences, and maybe she can better tell you how to go about those conversations or how to go about having those conversations. So once again, thanks to everyone for joining the call. We're really happy to have you here, and we think it's going to be like a really good use of your time. So again, without further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and introduce Adia. I mean, for those in the startup ecosystem, Adia doesn't need too much introduction. I mean, again, she used to lead the digital arm of Etisalat, where she spent most of her time, working with startups in integrating some of their product and services into the Etisalat suite of products. And also our most recent endeavor was, the VP at Migo, which most of us know as the credit infrastructure company, where she led most of the expansion, and some of those things generally, I mean, some of those efforts led to return to the hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's great to have Adia on the call. Again, like I said, she's a friend of the house. She's someone I'm personally looking forward to speaking to. Somebody messaged me late last night and say, "Oh, I hear you guys having Adia. I mean, this somebody in the oil and gas sector and I have a conflicting meeting, but please record the call and send it to me almost immediately after, so I will definitely record the call. And it's great to have Adia. Adia, thank you for joining the call and thank you for spending time with us today.
Wow, thank you so much, Coyote. Thank you everyone for joining. I feel very special. Still doesn't make up for you putting me after Jason though. I don't know how I'm supposed to live up to the mighty Jason and Jocko, but I will do my best. So yeah, again, thanks for having me. So I have a lot of battle scars from partnerships, and Coyote and I have gone back and forth about, what I can say to try to be as supportive of the needs of you, the attendees today. So I think if to the extent that you have questions as they come up, you can type them in the chat box. I may or may not get to them, but just I type them in there because they may remind me of something that I would like to say. And I think I'll just try to run through this, quite fluidly and easily, tell you a few stories, tell you some things I think are important as part of partnerships, and then I like to run these things in a pretty relaxed fashion. So bear with me. If my eyes dart off the screen, it's because I'm looking at some notes. Okay, so I guess we should start at the beginning. Why should you partner? When should you partner? I think that it is a massive challenge in this climb to pick up users, right? And because there's so much friction in doing business, and there's a lot of friction in achieving scale. You want to try and find people who may have cracked scale, but don't necessarily have your skill set or your capabilities or your insights or your tech, right? And then together, what you do is create additional value for a customer that has already been acquired through difficulty. I think for me, that forms the crux of why you should do it, right? You can try to attract your own users and find scale on your own, but I think we all know how difficult that is. So if there's someone else that has acquired customers and maybe could just add incremental value to them by partnering with you, I think that's a shorter path to success. But I think the challenge there is how do you now set up those partnerships, which I believe is the reason we're here today. So the next question I guess I would ask is, okay, when do you start thinking about partnerships? It's never too early and it's never too late, really, if you ask me. All right. So I'll tell you a few stories. So I've had discussions with Facebook and Google, and I'll tell each story separately. So when Facebook wanted to start what is now called Facebook Zero, it went by a completely different name back then. This was maybe, I don't know, 2016, 2015, something like that. What Facebook was trying to do was just get more people onto the internet, right? And get them onto Facebook, right? So they came into Nigeria and decided to partner with the telcos because unlike the US or maybe other developed countries, the telcos are the gateway to the internet. So it made sense, right? So when you're thinking about partners also, this is an important thing to remember. You need to think about, okay, who has the users, who has the channel to get to the people that I'm trying to get to? Right? So Facebook showed up. I got to take the meeting. So this was their proposition. They said, "Oh, we'd like to give people free access to the internet on your network." Right. So this is where you move to the next stage of the partnership, right? Okay, you started it off early and you've now got to test your value proposition, right? That's another thing. And I'll come back to talking about value propositions in a bit. Right. So you come back and you say, your Facebook, and you say, we want more people on the internet. Okay, everybody agrees. We want to give it to them for free. Okay, all right. I make money, the telco, make money by getting people to pay for the internet, but you want to give it to them for free. Okay, no problem. Let's continue the conversation, right? And we want it to be free forever. Okay, so at that point in time, I had to show Facebook the door. Some of you may know me. I'm not a very large person. I'm actually quite small, right? But I had to look at them and say, I'm sorry, no deal. I said this to Facebook. Right? But then, in that situation, I and the company that I worked for, Etisalat, had the leverage. Who is Facebook when you have no users in Nigeria? Nobody. But when you're Etisalat and you have 23 million users, you are the big boy at the table now. You can tell people what to do, right? So we'll come back to leverage, I guess, somewhere else in this conversation. So Facebook went back, refined the proposition. It still wasn't good enough. We did that 3-4 times. By the fourth time, we had gone back and forth listening to each other, right? They had their value proposition. They came to understand our value proposition, and I started to understand theirs. So together, we were able to beat together something that actually worked. But the point of this was long before there were any announcements, excuse me, about Facebook Zero, right? There were any announcements about, Facebook trying to get more people onto the internet. So for them, this was a product within their product, and it was super early stage. But at that point in time, they already just started having test conversations with partners to see, what was possible. And because they ran into issues in the beginning, they went back, refined the proposition, and eventually ended up with something that was tenable for both sides. I'll probably come back to this conversation again because we need to talk about how you manage, agendas and incentives, and how you get to know how to make your value proposition fit into your partner's value proposition. Right now, with Google, it was the opposite case, right? This was the well-developed, app store. And this at the time, this was when the Google App Store was still collecting fees for apps in dollars. So I did the deal with Google to get them to start collecting in Naira. So Google shows up. Again, this is also a very well-developed product. This wasn't even a new product. It was available in the rest of the world and even available in Nigeria, but it just wasn't scaling because of the dollar requirements, and everybody knows how that goes, right? So Google comes to my office and says, oh yeah, you collect whatever currency you want, and then you, Etisalat, buy the dollars, and then you give it to us. And, I looked at Google and I said, do I look like a BDC to you? I'm not a BDC. If it's your app store that you're trying to drive growth in, you know what I mean? If you want to drive your users, right, you do that on your own time. Don't come and create a task that does not fit into the traditional telco business and then make it my responsibility in service of your global expansion. So again, this was a very mature product. Google came to the table with a lot of, bravado, right? But at that time, again, I've made an example now of a product at super early stage and a very mature product. There's no time that is too early or too late to start thinking about partnership. Now, thinking about partnership really is it's not your product. Partnership enables your product. Partnership speeds up your time to revenue or your time to profits, or it just accelerates things in your business, but it's not your product, right? So you can actually start thinking about it any time that makes sense. So I think one example where we started thinking about partnerships on paper was actually at Migo, where there was the option to actually try to enter the market as a lone soldier providing credit to everybody. But then you start to ask yourself, look, how many users can you really get to by yourself? How much are you going to spend on marketing by yourself, right? But does everybody need credit? Yes. Do you have to do it alone? Probably not. So at this time, I was still at Etisalat. I hadn't even joined Migo. So Ekechi and I had a bunch of conversations where Ekechi is the founder, and we were brainstorming, and it ended up with us deciding to do two things: partnering with banks and partnering with telcos, right? But then the propositions for the banks and telcos was completely different from the same business. So this is the other thing one has to think about, right? Is that your value proposition is going to depend on the user that you're talking to. Your value proposition to your investors is different from your value proposition to your customers. It's different from your value proposition to your partners. And you have to try to achieve as much clarity as you possibly can to make your conversations easier, right? So at this point in time, we are actually, still, at early integration stage, building the first algorithm, blah, 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 blah. And then we ran into this issue of, okay, how do we maximize the reach of this product? So I said, okay, look, Ekechi, it would be great if one there was one sort of standard product instead of multiple fragmented products, right? How can we structure, are we willing to explore a structure, right, where this becomes a ubiquitous product? Anyway, we went through a whole bunch of details and figured out a way to make it work, right? And this relies on incentives, and I'll talk about incentives in a bit. But in the end, I picked up the phone, I called the other telcos and said, okay, hey, there's this great new product that I think you should launch. Now, I could do that because at the time, telcos tend to look at each other, especially in digital services, to see what products make sense and what products don't. And I had the reputation of finding stuff. I guess everybody knows how deeply involved I am in the startup ecosystem, right? It's because I went looking, I went hunting, and I wanted to work with best of breed products. So me and my team had quite a bit of attention. So for me to pick up the phone and tell another telco, you should launch this product, it actually kickstarted some conversations. Now, that wasn't the only plan to make the service available across multiple telcos. But that was a more sustainable version of the plan, because there was an over-the-top plan where Migo could deliver service across the telcos, right, without the participation of the telcos in terms of in the deal or in terms of marketing and telling their users and so on and so forth, right, which is slightly harder, or with the support of the telcos, and the telcos are picking up some of the responsibility of talking to their users and so on and so forth, right, and then the telco gets cut into the deal, which is slightly easier. You know what I mean? So yeah, there's never a wrong time to start talking about partnership. I think the really important thing you need to do is nail your value proposition. Right, so I see a question here asking about how you get in the door in the first instance when you're not Facebook or Google. Okay, so when I first came back to Nigeria, I didn't go to university in Nigeria. I felt at quite a disadvantage because I did not have those university level networks. I left the secondary school, and yeah, I act like a baby girl, but there was no Facebook when I finished secondary school. There was no Facebook when I finished university. There was barely email, right? So there was no way to keep in touch. So I've rebuilt those connections over the years now with social media, but back then it didn't really exist. So I felt at a disadvantage, right? And I'm sure that disadvantage shows up similarly if you feel like, okay, I don't know somebody at Facebook, I don't know somebody at Google. There are ways to build a reputation. There are ways to be known, and there are ways to get in the door. Somebody that knows somebody there, right? Nigeria is it's a big and a very, very small country, right? Use your investors, use your friends, use your relatives, use your uncles. Somebody that went to secondary school, as that person that you're trying to get to, started from somewhere. That person has a journey. With a little bit of looking, you can probably find a mutual connection, a mutual topic of interest, an event where you both end up. And then all you can do at that point is try. I'm not going to sit here and say that every relationship I have, I made and it was successful and we became the best of friends. Some of these relationships I had to actually seek out, but the goal is, the point is you don't want to do or die on any one relationship, right? You've got to have many eggs in that basket, but you've also just got to keep trying. And to be honest, social media makes it super, super easy now versus a time when, that didn't really exist. So I think that it's easy to go on LinkedIn and find the person that you are looking for, and then find which contacts you have in common. And then whoever you're most comfortable with, you hit them up and you say, look, I'm trying to reach this person. Now, having said that, you need to make sure that your reason for hitting this person up is legitimate and is compelling to that person, right? So you really have to sit down and understand your audience to the best of your ability. And if you find that you don't understand that particular audience, then you have to before you reach out to them, you've got to do a little bit of work of figuring out what it is they might want, and then feed that into your value proposition, right? I think in terms of value propositions, you can actually aid these conversations just simply depending on how you describe yourself to people, right? So for instance, I could go to a bank now, right? And here's the bottom line. I want the bank to give me money to lend in my credit business, right? So which argument do you think is going to work? I'm going to give you two. Do I tell the bank, hey bank, can you give me your money? Because I want to lend it to some guy whose phone number I have. I've never seen his face before. And I'm using one algorithm thing that they made in California, to lend to him. Or do you tell the bank, if your best investment gives you a 10% annual return, can you give me those same funds? And I will give you a 15% annual return, right? Where you have full sight of the funds and you can see everything that I'm doing with it. And at no point in time will you ever lose full sight of the funds. I mean, basically you say, I take it out, the maximum I can take out on any given day is 1% of the funds, something like that. So you are ultimately, the goal you are trying to meet is still, bank, give me money. But the first argument speaks to everything that banks might be scared of. And the second argument starts to speak to everything that banks might care about, right? So I think this is how you start to build something called leverage, right? So that comes from understanding what the other side wants. And then I think, especially in this, our low trust environment, having a track record, right, and building trust allows you to sort of sit in that conversation and determine how you are perceived. Okay, so it's very, you don't. Sometimes I know it can feel like a David versus Goliath situation, right? But in that fight, David did win because David had something and knew something that the bigger guy did not. Now, had they had a chance to chat before the fight, David would have said, this is what I'm about to do to you. Are you sure? And Goliath would have, maybe rubbed his head and said, okay, I might not be able to take that kind of hit. Okay, how can we work this out amicably? Right? So I think it's really important to try to construct your leverage. And this was an often frustrating part of conversations that I had with startups when they would come to me at Etisalat. They'd show up, have a product barely off paper. And they come in and then they'd ask, okay, everybody's heard about telco revenue share. Everybody's like, okay, you're just a telco, you're just sending out a text message. What are you doing? I should get 90% of my revenues. But unfortunately, that's just not the way the world works. The telco typically will look at you and say, well, I have the users, all 20 something million of them, or however many, right? So I'm going to take 70% of revenue and you can take 30%. You can argue about whether that's fair or not, but we'll come to that in another example, right? But the challenge is that for most startups that came to have that conversation with me, they usually barely had a product, right? They had not built a product that was native to a mobile environment. So there was already friction in the product. So the likelihood of it scaling was low. From my experience, having launched 1,000 products that look like it, right? You had no users, no paying users anyway. Maybe a few people that had tested the product and told you that it worked. And then you walk in and you're like, yes, I want to be able to do X, Y, and Z. That's not, that you're walking into a conversation with no leverage. So very often I said to startups, I said, look, if your mother pays you for this product, then you can come back and see me. Until your flesh and blood actually decides that, forget that you're related, I actually will give you money for this thing that you're providing. You have to question whether you have a value proposition or not. Because there was this assumption that we as a telco would just send out messages to all the users and the users would just immediately respond. But nobody knew how hard it was for even us, the telco, even with the users that had bought our SIM card, right? You need to remember that Nigeria is a multi-SIM market. Every day we had to beg and plead with customers, please top up this line, even though we know you have a Glow line, an Airtel line, and an MTN line. So you're still even fighting every day to sell the core product. And somebody off the streets is saying, just send text message now, and your users will just answer you. It really wasn't that easy. So again, it comes back down to your value proposition. I'm reading this really good book now on propositions called Obviously Awesome. If you can get it, I think it's really good. And it'll teach you how to talk about your product in a really deep and rich way. Beyond those Uber for X or for this particular segment, we are, we have this capability and we can do this better than Y. Just that fill in the blank sentence that I'm sure we've all seen about value proposition, right? And I think these are the things that actually help your conversation move along. And I also think that there's a lot of serendipity in partnerships. You won't have to strain yourself, right, when you meet the right partner. I don't think so. There are some conversations that just go well. Now think about, conversations that you have to sort of negotiate, interviews, and stuff like that. Any sort of conversation where you're supposed to come out with a collective outcome. The easier ones, the natural ones, those are the ones you want to strive to hit. But in order to get there, it just requires a lot of preparation, right? And this is really, really understanding who you are, what you're trying to deliver, what the other person is concerned about, right? What their agenda is, at least to the best of your ability, right? And then taking it from there. Now, if you don't understand what the other person wants, don't feel like in that first conversation, you need to make a deal. Then the purpose of that first conversation is to ask questions, to try to understand where that alignment can be achieved. That part is actually really, really important and very often underestimated. I can count the number. I've met hundreds of startups. I can count the number on one hand that ever came to me and said, Adia, what goals are you trying to achieve? Most people would walk into the room and tell me, Adia, we will help you sell data. In my mind, I'm like, who told you that that's actually my problem in life that you can solve? You know what I mean? So I think it's really important to take time to get to know what the partner you are negotiating with or intend to negotiate with wants. And if you don't know, find out indirectly. Find out from people who have been in that position or been in that industry or done a presentation to that industry or have been in a position where people in that industry have asked them questions or shared their challenges or needs, and just do the work. It's a little bit more, it appears to not be valuable, but trust me, it really, really is. And when you sort of walk into a room and you strike a partnership over a drink, you are there, your meeting is 2 hours, and you literally spend 5 minutes talking about the actual business, and you spend the other 2 hours, the rest of the time talking about other things. Then you'll understand the value of having done the work, because then it doesn't take too much time to express all of that. Okay, and sometimes these you have to constantly refine how you express who you are. So it's not a one and done type of situation, right? So and I've seen this happen a couple of times. It's quite annoying when you're going through it, but now that it's happened to me a few times, I'm like, okay, I'm used to this. This is gonna come, because as you talk to your customers, they will, in the conversations, if you listen and hear between their words, you'll start to hear what they really, really need, and you'll start to extrapolate whether what you are trying to do fits in or not. So let's see. How do you know what partners to approach? Okay, I think this, if you sort of sit down and think about who has the customers that you are looking for, or who has the resources that you need, right? So I'll use Migo as an example again. I mean, you're in Nigeria, you want to lend money to Nigerians, you need Naira. Who has the Naira banks? Like, I don't even need to give you 3 guesses to think about where to get that money. But then in Nigeria, there are different types of banks, right? So there are commercial banks, tier 1 commercial banks, tier 2 commercial banks, microfinance banks, finance houses, wealth managers, and so on and so forth. Now, what you find is that when you have a market that's segmented like that, the conversation with each of these parties is a little bit different, and you get a slightly different response. Can I go to a tier 1 commercial bank who probably has a loan offering right now and say, will you give us your deposits to lend? They'll probably say no, because in their heads, they're thinking, me and you, fintech, that is lending people money, are in competition. True or not, that's probably what they're going to think, right? So no problem, you leave them. Then you now go to a tier 2 bank. Is the conversation slightly different? Okay, fine. Yeah, sure. These guys are probably slightly different because they are They're probably interested in customer acquisition. They're probably interested in being a bit of a challenger bank. They're probably more open to innovation. You make the pitch again, you see what they say. Then you go to microfinance banks who have been specifically mandated to lend, but then you can't really scale if you are dealing with the physical space around your microfinance bank. So an electronic solution, to lend, or at least to a digital solution for lending, or at least putting the funds that they have in the bank to work through a lending solution makes a lot of sense for those guys, right? Because then they're meeting the mandate that's been given to them, right? Then maybe you go to a wealth manager whose goal is they need to provide a fixed return. They have a risk intolerant, set of investors, right? If you go and tell them you're lending with an algorithm, no chief risk officer, no collateral, you may or may not get a good response. They have a ton of money, maybe, right? But how, you then have to figure out, okay, what's the risk appetite of the specific wealth management, company that you're talking to, right? So again, there's some trial and error in these discussions, and that is actually perfectly okay. And I think that it's better to know that upfront, so that you're not disappointed, or so that you don't think that it's not a good use of your time, right? And I guess that's why I'm here. Right. So just so that these things take a lot of conversation and a lot of time. And I think that if you are not, some people are naturally given to these kinds of conversations. Some people are naturally given to business development and deal making. But I think that at the initial stage, it's going to be the founder's responsibility. So you're going to have to love talking to your partners somehow, right? I know it may not come naturally if you're more introverted, but I think you should just take some time to build some self-awareness of who you are and find an authentic way to do this, right? So, I mean, if you are more extroverted like me, you can get into a meeting and crack a joke, make everybody comfortable, make yourself feel comfortable, and then carry on the conversation. But if you're less so, have your conversations, one-on-one, find something to bond on or bond over, right? And then take things from there. I can't understress how important likability is when doing deals or finding partnerships, especially if they are partnerships with people that are not inside your direct line of sight. Likability is extremely important because people do business with people they like. People trust people they like. So if you do not establish that trust and likability, you'll start to see it in the friction in your relationships. So factor in that time that has to be taken. When you tell somebody you're going to call. When you call the person, find a way to serve or offer something. Don't let the whole conversation be about what you can extract from it, right? So that this way the relationship is a two-way relationship rather than just a one-way relationship, one-way extractive relationship. I can tell you that people that are in decision-making positions, there are some that may get off on having to holds authority over you or giving you something. And there are some that are just like, I'm going to, hang out with the people that I have the best time with, period. Right? So you need to just, again, try to make your interactions as pleasant and pleasurable as possible. And then this also makes it easier for them to surface what it is they need from you so that you know how to massage your, your value proposition appropriately. Which leads me to another thing that I think is important to talk about, which is incentives. I say this word a lot, but I feel like people don't really understand what I'm talking about, and I cannot say it enough. It's very important in a partnership to think about, why, not only why you are at the table, but why does the other person have to be at the table? Why does the other person want to talk to you, right? The way our brains work, right? We have to look out for ourselves first, So even if somebody has told me or made me have a conversation, the conversation must serve my interests. Now, those interests could be diverse or varied and may not even have anything to do with the deal in question, right? But you must keep your antenna up when you're meeting somebody or about to meet somebody to try to figure out, okay, what is this person's actual interest? Because think about it, even when you do charity, you do so that you can say to yourself, I have committed an act of charity. You may say that to yourself, you may say that to other people, you may get on a hilltop and say it, but there's still that satisfaction that you derive from the fact that you've done something for somebody, But I think where you really start to, make partnerships a superpower is when you start to think through the incentives of the other side. I mean, look at what I just did with the banking sector in Nigeria. I talked about the incentives on the commercial tier 1 bank, tier 2 bank, MFB, blah, 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 blah. You need to be able to do that, to be able to successfully walk into a room, is to be able to walk into a room and be successful, right? And then think about how you feel when you are somewhere and you feel, this person gets me. Don't you just want to hang around those people forever? Don't you just want to do whatever it takes to just keep that energy around you when you feel understood, when you feel like they feel your pain, right? So that's where it's really, really important to understand how incentives, work. I'll see if before the end of this conversation, I can think about a classic case of incentives working or not working. Okay, no, let me go back to the Facebook Zero conversation. So what happened in those initial conversations, and the reason we couldn't make a deal with the initial versions of Facebook Zero was because what they did was set up a situation where they were going to make profit for themselves and drive cost at Etisalat. So essentially what they wanted to do was they were like, okay, Etisalat, let's strike a partnership. We'll get people to consume data. You will give it away for free. We will be selling ads. So we're not sharing that ad money with you. But if you need to upgrade your network because data usage is growing faster than you expect, well, that's your business. We're not going to do that with you. Incentives are all wrong. So it was very easy for me to say, there's no conversation to have here. Now, in the deal of in the version of Facebook Zero where that we launched, here's how the deal changed. So Facebook said, okay, you want to sell data plans. We want more people on the internet, no problem. So we will create a version of Facebook that consumes the minimum amount of data. So no pictures, no video, only text, right? We will also not sell ads in Facebook Zero. So we are not profiting off of the cost that is driven in your business, okay? And we will also allow the internet or create Facebook Zeros with a time limit so that eventually we can help you upsell so that people get a data plan. So you see, by that version of the conversation, after a lot of listening, this took years, right? Facebook, and us were able to now hammer out a deal that made sense for both sides. And I believe Facebook Zero is still, live today in many, many, many countries. But that deal only worked and is well celebrated and is well used and integrated into telco strategies when, Facebook was able to modify their value proposition so that it met a mutual need. So I'm being asked whether gifting makes sense. I think it does, within reason, right? My father told me this a long time ago, that gifts create goodwill. But I think that you need to understand that there's a difference between a gift and a bribe. And I think a gift has more enduring benefit than a bribe, which is like super, short term and not driven by incentives at all. A gift should reflect an understanding of the person that you are making a gift to. I don't know how well hampers do this. I think they do sometimes, but not all the time, right? So I think that it is, for me, gifts are a tool within that charm arsenal to build trust and, build relationships with potential or existing partners. So to the extent that, they are valued, you just have to sort of manage that so you don't cross any lines that you regret in the future. Okay. So let's see now. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit now about how the long sales cycles for business development. I guess, yeah, they are part of the game. I've just told you how, it took years to do Facebook Zero It took years to get the Google Play Store in Naira. They eventually opened the Naira account. Took 3 years. It actually took 3 years. Small me, when I met Sundar, he was like, "Hey, Adia, do you have any feedback for Google?" I said, "Yes, okay." I said, "It shouldn't take 3 years to open a bank account. What's wrong with you people?" But it's just, it's par for the course. But I think that in an environment like this where execution is a challenge, it's really important to not put your eggs in one basket. I know that for a startup that's small, resources are tight. And that's fine. But I think that you have to have a little bit of balance. You have to mix your propositions or your possibilities up a little bit. There will be some possibilities that you understand very well. The market needs them. There's low execution risk for you in your startup. Definitely start with those, right? And I would say just start to have something trickling in, either users or revenue trickling in with those, before you now go and swing for the fences with, big partnerships. And you don't have to go for the biggest partnerships first. I mean, I also don't recommend going for the number one player in the market first, because typically number one, players in the market have certain behaviors that they exhibit. Now, I even say number one to mean real number one, and I think I'm number one, right? So there's a dynamic that comes with dealing with the biggest player in any market, right? So just because you see certain yellow and orange brands doing that or behaving like that in Nigeria, trust me, I've seen this thing everywhere. It's not so start with a challenger brand. Less risk, easier to get a meeting. They may respond to a LinkedIn message or some person in your network contacting them on your behalf. Don't be afraid to get your network to support you. Okay, but like I said, for those of us that may feel a little bit bad about doing this or guilty about doing this, start these conversations by offering to help. Offer to do something for the person first. And then maybe so that when you need something, you feel less icky, asking for a favor, right? So, sorry, I've lost yes, long sales cycles. Okay, so yeah, so I would say when you have something coming in, the low risk stuff that's chugging away, then you now move on to progressively larger partnerships, right? And then it's okay. You don't have to go for, again, the biggest guy in the market right away. Start with smaller partners, test your proposition, see how long these conversations, take. Like for instance, the Migo credit API, that's a 2-week job. We had partners that integrated that API in 5 days. We had partners that integrated it in 18 months, and at the end of 18 months, didn't even launch. But what do? You just keep it moving, right? And because you have a mix of partners, you don't, losing one is, you mourn the loss, have a drink on Friday, start fresh on Monday with a different plan. I wouldn't say, you live or die by those partnerships. It's the same way when Facebook and Google, didn't work, and those would be considered massive partnerships, even at the telco. right? Because I had so many other things that I was doing, it was easy to just objectively assess the quality of the relationship, and be able to tell people, look, this isn't working, and let's come back to it, or let's revisit it, or let's revise what we're talking about. Okay, so Kayode asked me to talk about horizontal partnerships. So yeah, there's definitely some value here. I've done it, still do it. I'm not afraid to do it. Especially because sometimes they can help you build leverage. So many may not believe this, but Migo and Carbon pitched together on more than one occasion. And many people, tried to promote this fake fight, thinking that we're competitors and, blah, blah, blah. Nope. We've even, we've pitched to major partners. So this was one way we were trying to build leverage. We were actually both invited to a pitch to a major partner. We had a chat before, came to certain agreements, and said, okay, this part I can do, this part you can do. This is what we share, this is what we do separately. And then we got there, coincidentally, we were in the same color. So it actually really looked, very like, we are done at Shoebi to go to this pitch, right? But we did it. So I think there are some cases where the market is big enough, and where you may be in the same vertical, but there may be slight differences in your competencies, right? Or if together you have 1 million users with one startup, 500,000 users in another startup, and putting 1 plus 1 actually now makes 2, and 2 is a more compelling number to take to a pitch than 1 or half, then do it, right? And then you figure out how you split the markets later on. These things are not necessarily, it's not marriage. You can partner for a time, and you can partner for certain parts of your business. You can share, because you need other startups to validate your value proposition. Because if you're the only person talking about a particular way to do business, only you will carry all the friction. Only you will carry the newness, the stress of launching a new idea in a market, right? So you want to share that with other startups where it makes sense. And I think in Nigeria, kind of always, it makes sense. There are so many untapped opportunities and markets here that, there's enough room for at least 2 competitors. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. So partnerships and when they go wrong. I think some of us may have seen in the news Apple's recent challenges with companies like Hey for email and Fortnite for gaming. So I think in that particular case, I think both parties, Hey and Fortnite, are just being a little bit whiny. It's like going to a restaurant and having a nice big dinner. You are full. You went back for seconds. You've eaten. You can't even move. And then you're like, this food is too expensive, sir. Well, you looked at the menu, you saw the price. You went ahead to eat, went back for seconds, right? And then after you finished eating, you're not like, oh, it's too expensive. So I think in that particular case, it's just a case of a partnership needing to just, it's for a time, it can be over. I personally, if I were Apple, I wouldn't even let Fortnite back into the App Store. But then that's me and I guess my ego, but basically to give a little bit of background for those that are not deep into this stuff. So Apple's App Store, right? They'll let you launch your app in the App Store, right? But then when it's time to make a payment, Apple takes 30%. They let the developer keep 70% of the revenue. But they do take that 30% for payment facilitation, App Store maintenance, and so on and so forth, right? Everybody pays that. You don't have to pay it. Amazon, for instance, does not make those payments to Apple. They merely just host their app in the store, but they don't receive any payments through Apple's infrastructure. So if you're ordering from Amazon and you're ready to pay, you have to come out of the app, go on the web to Amazon's website and pay there. You cannot do that through Apple. Ostensibly, this is probably because Amazon does not want to pay that 30%, which is fine, no problem. But for Fortnite and Hey, Hey.com, who does, there's an email app. You know, if you're launching and you want to collect fees, it's in the agreement. You pay 30%. It's optional. But what happened is that both these companies launched their apps and then now started complaining about the fee. In Fortnite's case, Fortnite has now become one of the, you know, most valuable games in the world, right? So this is definitely a chop belly full type of situation, right? So Fortnite has now exited the Apple Store, whether they were forced out or they opted out, I don't know, right? Which is again also fine. All they now need to do is create a payment mechanism and start collecting credit card and payment information on their side. Now, I think when Apple, you know, why does Apple take 30%, right? There's a reason. Collecting credit card and payment information from people takes a lot of time, takes a lot of trust, takes a lot of verification, right? There's a lot of work in the back end, which potentially Fortnite is not valuing at 30%. So they don't believe that that work is enough to for them to give up 30% of whatever it is they're paying. This is also a classic thing I see in negotiations where someone else is looking at your business and trying to estimate your value and is not open to a deeper understanding of how you have arrived at your numbers. So it's important to approach these conversations with a lot of patience if the partnership is important to you, right? In Apple's case, there are 3 million games in the App Store. I mean, everybody will be all right if they don't have Fortnite. Apple will, you know, having Fortnite's game in the App Store or not, it's not the difference between whether Apple is going to be a successful or valuable company or not, right? You know, so they don't really need to sit down, especially with the way Fortnite made quite a messy noise about it, right? So I think it's very important to make sure that you understand how to value your business through the other person's eyes, right? And vice versa, right? And I think that leads me to another point in this environment, which is, you know, more around negotiating how much you take away from an agreement, right? Do you negotiate in a way that allows the pie become bigger? Or do you negotiate in a way that you get the biggest share of a very small pie? I think that in low trust societies where, you know, you can't really see into the future, you know, the tendency is to negotiate for a bigger share of a very small pie, as opposed to structuring a partnership that allows, you know, the universe of revenue to become bigger, and then you take a seemingly small share. I find that, you know, in emerging markets, you know, that are sort of really, really hyper-focused on the short term, you know, and then things like currency devaluations make these kinds of things worse, right? People are really, really, really focused on how much can I make today and how do I make sure I'm taking the most out of this agreement, even though I might be doing the least amount of work, you know, in the other person's eyes, right? So again, this is something that you have to be, you know, these bigger share versus bigger pie discussions. You have to be conscious of that. And again, it takes a lot of patience and then understanding the other side enough to figure out how to make sure that they understand, okay, this thing that this other person is doing, I can't do it. I don't know how to do it. It's going to take too much work for me to figure out. I'm just going to pay them, and the amount I'm paying them works for me. That's the ideal where you want to get to. I've just realized that it's like 5:03 and I've been talking for almost an hour. And this was me thinking that I wouldn't have so much to say. Kaide, are you there?
I'm 100% here, Adia. I literally was about sending you a message to say, wow, that's like...
Yeah, I didn't even notice the time go by. You guys are great. I can't see anybody, but I can feel everybody on the call. Should we switch to questions?
Yeah. I guess you can wrap up your thoughts, or your last thoughts on that, and then we can switch to taking some of the questions that we have.
Okay. So I think that there are a bunch of things to remember. I guess if I'm to sort of sum up what I've said, I think incentives, right? Figure out everybody's why as much as you can. I think that understanding how to construct your leverage is customized to many situations, but there are a few different things you can do. You can look bigger. You can look bigger by horizontally sort of partnering. You can, have a nice big user base. You can have cracked a problem that the other side has not, And then I think that you have to really understand how to negotiate so that you avoid the bigger share versus bigger pie problem that I talked about. Negotiate such that your business and your participation is properly valued, so that when you name your price, it's well understood. And I think you also need to be very clear on your value proposition and understand that it's a lot more work than filling in the blanks. As we are often taught by the internet, but the value proposition is actually a tougher thing to work out than it seems on the surface. But when you crack it, you just walk into a situation, and then everybody gets you, and then it makes your conversations a lot easier. So I think in summary, those are like, the things that you should start, sort of thinking through and keeping an eye on. Hopefully I've given enough tips where, starting tomorrow, you can change the way you handle each of these elements when you're structuring a partnership. Okay, all right.
Thank you so much, Adia. I think that's been pretty useful. I mean, I see a comment here, someone saying that this conversation has been tailored for her because she's about going into a partnership negotiation, and she's found some of the things she's talked about really useful. I mean, there are a few things I think I would also just like to, double down on. I mean, I liked when you talk about just like understanding your audience. So before walking into the room with the partners, understand what's important to them. I mean, not just trying to sell and sell and sell. I mean, you need to figure out what's in it for them. I liked where you talked about also low hanging fruits, right? In terms of like, creating segmentations for the partners you want to talk to. Before talking to a tier 1 bank, can you go after like a microfinance bank, which is easier, which is less friction, and then you're able to, and I also like the examples you give around framing your value proposition, where you talked about your interactions with the bank, which is you could either walk to a bank and say, hey, I have an algorithm and I can learn, or you could say, what, your highest returning asset gives you 10%, but I can give you 15% with this, and, just framing it a way that resonates with the partner, I think that's really important. On stakeholder management, I wanted to double down on that. You had talked about how gifting, it's good if given in the right context. But generally, how do you manage your stakeholders? I mean, not even just after getting to the partnership, how do you ensure that these people are constantly happy with you? And in cases where you have an internal champion, and for whatever reason, that champion has to be transferred or resigns, how do you ensure like a smooth transition of that partnership in a way that whoever is coming in is able to share the same vision, with the previous partner? I think there's a question caller asked also, which I also want to double down on, which is in terms of, power dynamics between, partners. I see some partnership from startups saying like, how on earth did you sign to that? Or how on earth did you agree to that? But they're like, hey, was a take it or leave it deal. So I had to take it, right? So how do you balance the dynamics of power within, a relationship, in a way that you're not screwed for life, by virtue of that partnership? And I guess after that, I'll just ask some of the other questions. We have about, I think, 6 questions in the Q&A, and we can just take them.
Sure, I see them. Okay, so I'll start with your last one. So in those take it or leave it deals, they are not for life. So I think usually if you are in a position where a much larger partner than yourself says, the only circumstances under which you are coming into this company are these, sign a short-term agreement. Sign it for 1 year, sign it for 2 years. Now, the hope there is that you're signing a shorter term agreement, right? But in that 1 year, your startup is not going to die because you have other sources of growth coming in. Okay, so for those types of situations, when it now gets to the point of renegotiation, hopefully you've done something in that business that they may not have been able to do, copy, or have not seen before. Then you can now tell them, well, the only circumstances in which I stay in this agreement is if we adjust these numbers. Finish. It's a slower way to build leverage, but I have invited people to put me in that position. And when they have, I've capitulated and given them better terms, right? And vice versa. So I think that, like I said before, these things are not no agreement you are signing is necessarily permanent. And the more uncomfortable the agreement is for you, but you know that partner, your ability to put them on your website, and sort of have a testimonial from them is really important to your business. Take it, and take it for a short time. And then make sure you have other money coming into the business that sorts you out. Now, to your question, Kaede, about you're working with one person and then they end up leaving the department. Okay, back to the putting your eggs in one basket. Don't work with one person. Work with multiple people in a department, right? Because you have to have redundancy, right? Again, in a sort of society where things are not stable, people change jobs. This is a reality. It's not. Nobody's a slave anymore. So everybody's indispensable. So you shouldn't be, you shouldn't be working with just one person, and your value should not be understood with just one individual in an organization, right? So again, this is back to your value proposition. It should be something that has value to an organization, irrespective of, who you start the conversation with. That person internally, that's your point of contact, should be able to comfortably explain, without forcing it down anybody's throat, why the proposition is important, right? So I think that now starts to help. So I usually have multiple friends in organizations that I can call, right? And what I do sometimes is if myself and my team are, working on something, I may sort of make friends at one level, then encourage my team to make friends at a different level or in a different department in an organization, so that when there's change, the setback is not as massive. Okay. Kyle, did I address all your questions?
Yes, you did. There's just one final question around managing stakeholders. So aside gifting, what else can you do to smoothen the relationship and ensure, like a really good relationship between you and your stakeholder? I mean, offering them value, obviously, and what else can you do to just, make that relationship smooth?
Friendship. Just friendship. Like, I feel like we don't really need to overthink these things. You know what I mean? I have the most random things that I discuss with people that started out as partners and have ended up becoming friends. And many of these partner relationships were very antagonistic at the start. I remember the person that was running business development for Google has now become one of my really, really good friends. But our first 2-3 meetings, we were practically throwing stuff at each other in the meeting, right? So, but I think that you walk in, you're having a discussion with someone, pay them a compliment. Like, there are some people with whom these guys started off as partners. If I get a new jacket, I'm having a conversation with this person. If you talk about jewelry, you talk about sports, there are so many things to talk about. But each person, there may be a contact point for you to form that, a relationship. A partner of mine was just complaining the other day, a partner, now friend, about how he was stressed out. And I said, do you want to go to the beach? I mean, we can't travel, we can't do this, blah, blah, blah. He's planning a beach weekend. I put the person in touch with, I send them a couple of beach locations that I like. And that was it. So I think just pure friendship, first of all, goes a really, really long way. So you don't always have to support a relationship with, something. You know what I mean? There are some people that just, on a good day, or if I'm having a bad day, they'll just say hi. And then I'm like, oh my God, I haven't spoken to this person in such a long time. What are you up to? How's your business doing? Blah, 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 blah. Because I care about this person and I care about their success. So I would say let's not underestimate the value that just, friendship has. Okay.
Great. So I guess we're just going to dive right into the questions of the Q&A box.
Okay.
I think we have about 5 questions. I guess I'll just take them one after the other, and you can share your thoughts on some of those questions. Does that work?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So the first question is, from Rufus Giwa, it says, "Hello, Adia. At what point do you pull out of a failing partnership?"
Okay. So I think with this one, it's every partnership has a set of a goal or goals that it is supposed to meet. So again, partnerships, they don't need to last forever. They can, right, if they keep working, if they keep serving the goals that brought you to that partnership in the first place, right? So I think it's very important to clearly, at least as clearly as you can, establish what those goals for that partnership might be, right? And then if it gets to a point where you are not getting those goals met, it might be time to just pull out of it. Now, I would suggest that you pull out of it in as friendly a manner as you can possibly manage. Because, the world is too small for people to be burning bridges, right? Especially, in the markets that we're in. The person may change jobs and then end up somewhere else where you need to work with them. And they will fall back on the previous experience that they had with you, whether you like it or not. So just try to exit these things with as much goodwill as you can muster. Even more goodwill than that might even be seen in that type of situation. The reason you're doing that is to protect, your future and to protect your relationship. You know what I mean? I've seen situations where, you need to terminate a partnership with one person, right, for whatever reason. And they are the ones that will now go and do the business development for your next set of partnerships for you. That's actually what you want, right? But that only comes from making sure that, you are leaving the room in a friendly manner. Okay. All right, I see Kevin's question.
Yes, please go ahead, Adia.
Yeah. So Kevin's asking if a digital bank with 50,000 customers wants to partner with a telco, how best to approach it? Kevin, it really depends on what you want, right? So, and what role the telco can play in addressing those goals. And then based on that role, are you willing to spend money, right? Or compensate the telco appropriately, right? Now, the challenge with banks and telcos typically, and I've been on both sides, right, is that banks more frequently do not value what the telcos do. I think that there's also a lot of measurement of how a telco business should be structured based on how a bank's business is structured. And that's a fundamental misunderstanding that I've been watching this relationship now for almost 10 years. It's amazing to see that people are not really even trying to understand each other. Telcos walk into relationships with banks and we are like, the smallest telco has more users than the biggest bank. What is the conversation? If the fight here is for users and customer acquisition. Now, banks will say, oh, but not all your users are valuable. But in a technology business, user is user. The cost to acquire the user, is not the same. Where for a bank, user acquisition is driven by a massive CapEx investment in a local area and so on and so forth. So Kevin, back to your question. It really depends again on your goal and whether the telco has the capabilities to help meet the goal, right? But I would encourage you to, rather than go to any conversation with a fixed mindset, which every banker, it's like, everybody's just in a different suit, but it's the same person, thinks the same. I would just suggest that you go with an open mindset and see what's possible. Okay. What do you do when someone in the company feels their role is threatened by your partnership? Okay, Femi, that's actually a great question. So I guess it's really down to, sometimes you can't avoid this. And then you now have to sort of, marshal up like you're going to war and get your, if the person can come after you as a startup, find somebody to put on your team or to have as your stakeholder that the person cannot go after, like their boss, right? Or somebody in a more relevant department in their company, right? So, so I think that sometimes it's good to attempt to try to neutralize the threats that this person perceives, but you may not always be able to do that. And then in which case, you just find a bigger gun to put in your arsenal and then let the person know that it's there, finish, and then keep doing what you're doing. Okay. The problems like distrust, non-transparency, and insecurity are our software development solutions. I'd like to ask if enterprise and governments have these problems. I would ask for collaboration and partnership. I'm sure they do, but I think that one has to think about your value proposition much more specifically. Which enterprise, which departments in the government, which people in the government, what task are they carrying out? What's the problem they are trying to solve? I agree with you that there are probably software solutions for many of these things, right? But, I think one just has to be a little bit more specific. The more specific you are, the closer you get to who you need to talk to, and the more you refine your value proposition, and hopefully the easier that conversation becomes. Okay. Babatunde Lawal is asking, how do you build good rapport for the first time with an investor influencer you might not have met before, but he or she is key to what you're trying to build? Okay, so I say just try to reach out to them. Hey, I'd like to talk. This is what I'd like to talk about. But then someone somewhere in the chat said something about what's in it for me. You have to be careful, so that you not just talk about what you need, you talk about what's in it for them as well. All right, and try as much as possible to make that clear as quickly as possible. Please don't send multi-page emails, and things like that, right? Just get to the point of, okay, why am I here? Why am I here? Why am I? Like me, especially right now, I'm like, when somebody sends me an email needing something, I'm hoping that very quickly I understand why I'm required in that conversation. Otherwise, I'm opting out because, this life is only one. So like quickly, let's get to the point. But that's me and my patience level. You know what I mean? So I would say, in terms of good rapport, if you know the person, talk about something they posted and the effect it had on you, right? Everybody always wants to know, if you posted something on the internet or you're speaking on social media, oh, that talk was nice and it was meaningful to me. Don't just try as much as possible not to make surface compliments. Actually develop a point of view and express it to the person. I don't think there's anybody in this world that hates a compliment. Just make it a good one. Don't just say you're a fine girl. No, that's annoying. Denike, 2 questions. Are you not cheating, Denike? When you go into a partnership negotiation, what key things are your bottom line personally before you can proceed? Not necessarily pertaining to the partnership itself. How do you advise breaking the ice if one does not have a contact to make an introduction, especially if you're reaching out in a totally new relationship? Okay, so I feel like Nigeria is small enough where if you don't know the person, if the person is not 2 degrees separated, they are 3 degrees separated. If they're not 3 degrees separated, they are 4 degrees separated. You can sure get to the person. It may be a chain of introductions, but you can get there. Or last, send them a direct message on social media, right? If their DMs are open, just reach out. What's the worst they can say? No. And no has never killed anybody. Never. And in terms of breaking the ice, I would say do what comes naturally to you. At the end of the day, everybody has their point of view, right? When you see a person, there is a reason you want to talk to them. There is a mental reaction you are having to that person. Start with that, right? And then take it from there, How do you scale up in the value of partnerships? You can start with a smaller budget, but how can you grow and increase the value of the deal? I would say that at the end of the day, as you make more money, you put it back into the deal now, or you put it back into the business. I'm not really sure I understand this question. If you'd like, you can restate it with a little bit more specifics. But Kayode, I think someone has put up their hand in the attendees.
Yes. Des, I'm not sure who that is. Would you want to just type out your questions?
Yeah.
Just so we have a smooth experience with the webinar,
Okay.
I think there's a final question for you on the chat box, Ada.
Okay.
Adia. Someone's asking something around tools and how do you filter for partnerships?
Okay, you touched on avoiding the largest pain. What other tools do you have to filter out partnerships that are likely not going to lead anywhere? Well, sometimes these things filter themselves out. If you're pinging somebody and they don't want to answer you, you've been filtered out non-in now. You know what I mean? So I think you've just got to try. And like I said, there's a lot of serendipity in these things. Sometimes they just work, sometimes they don't. Sometimes you have a great connection with the person, sometimes you don't. All you can do, all you can control is the effort you put into it, and whether you try or not. So I would just say, try and find a way to reach out and make that gesture. I guess in a way that does not feel like you are you are, it's a do or die type of situation. Just find an easy way to just reach out to people, and then just take it from there. And then when you go out, you interact with people, you're at an event or you're on a webinar, you can say to people, hey, I liked what you said. So I see someone has pasted their LinkedIn connection, hey, that's one way to try. I bet of the 100 people that attended this webinar, one person may click and then they'll connect on, what one or two of the things that I might have said about partnerships today, or one of the questions that's come up, and another friendship is born. So you really just have to put yourself out there, but like I said before, no has never killed anybody. So, and if anything, no's make you stronger, because they help you get to yes with a little bit more intelligence, because you now know what people say no to. So then you adjust your messaging next time. Okay.
Great.
Fantastic.
I think that's a really high note to bring this webinar to an end. Thank you so much, Adia. I mean, I had one final question generally for people that would like to, reach out to you and engage you further. What's the best way to reach you?
Twitter or LinkedIn.
Okay, Twitter or LinkedIn. Your Twitter handle is
Adia Speaks.
Just type it out.
Yeah, please. Thank
you. Adia Speaks.
I don't think there are many people that have my name on Twitter, so I think it'll be
fine. Okay, and I guess on Twitter you can just go and search for Adia Sowho, and I'm sure they'll find you.
I think so too.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Adia. I mean, it was.
I hope this was useful to everyone. Just listening to myself talk for 1.5 hours. So I hope that it makes you have more successful partnerships starting tomorrow.
I definitely am sure that a lot of people found this useful. I've been getting WhatsApp messages also, from people on the webinars, saying, hey, cool stuff, and of course, some of them want to engage you further. So I'm hoping you're able to connect with them, or they're able to connect with you rather on Twitter or LinkedIn, and hopefully, get your insight. Somebody was saying something about mentorship and stuff, but again, that's not my conversation to have, right? So again, feel free to reach out to Adia. And I'm sure she'll be happy to engage with you. Thank you so much, Adia, for joining the call. And thanks to everyone that's been listening. Again, the goal, the difference between like rockstar entrepreneurs is just being able to take the knowledge you've acquired and apply it every single day. So it's my hope that we take this knowledge and just apply it to those next partnerships and, secure the bag, as they would say. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Adia.
Yeah, just a fun fact. Everybody, my mom is here, so please say hi to my mom. And my sister is also here, so just say hello to my mom. Now has this habit of attending my webinars. I'm not really sure how to feel about it, but lockdown.
Great. So hi, mom. Hi, sister. I think it's a great feeling, right? I mean, for the last year, I guess I spoke somewhere for the first time. My mom attended, and I was like, I had the whole thing. She came to hug me, and I was like, wow, such a surreal feeling, So I guess it's a great thing. Thanks everyone. Thanks, mommy. Thanks to your sister for
joining. Have a good weekend, everyone. Thanks so much, Ventures Platform. Thank you, Kaede. Thanks, Kola. All right. Bye.
Bye.